wrapped up with talking to someone about hospice for long and forgot what I was doing. There's Pam.
Oh, Pam's with us now.
Hey,
All right,
Pamela.
let me see if the
Hi, Pam.
stream's coming up there. See if it comes up here. Yep, it's coming up there. Let's see if it's coming up on Facebook and where will it go? There it is. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we're going to continue our study in the Urantia Book. And we're on paper 179. That's page 17901 in some of the books. And the original book, it's on paper page 1936.1. It's the Last Supper. I've done this paper about 3 or 4 times over the years, so done it quite a bit. So we're going to enjoy this tonight. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for everybody that's listening, and let's get started. Let me change the slide here and figure out which slide I need to change. Excuse me, y'all. Y'all have to watch me tonight because I'm using my Windows computer again instead of my Apple because I can't get my Apple to match up my voice. So here we go, the Last Supper. Let's see who's Pam, why don't you start reading since you're at the bottom, and I'll just work my way over now.
Okay. Paper 179, The Last Supper. During the afternoon of this Thursday, when Philip reminded the master about the approaching Passover and inquired concerning his plans for its celebration, he had in mind the Passover supper, which was due to be eaten on the evening of the next day, Friday. It was the custom to begin the preparations for the celebration of the Passover not later than the noon of the preceding day. And since the Jews reckoned the day as beginning at sunset,
You lose your place.
yeah, this meant that
Yes,
Saturday's Passover supper would be eaten on Friday night, sometime before the midnight hour.
all right, so this is the plan. They normally would do it on the next night, but since Jesus wanted to do this because he knew of the impending disaster that was coming, he
Right.
wanted to do it that night, right? So let's go to the next. And this is a picture of where they went from Gethsemane Park down into the upper chamber. All right, Gary, would you take the next place?
Yeah. The apostles were, therefore, entirely at a loss to understand the master's announcement that they would celebrate this Passover one day early. They thought, at least some of them did, that he knew he would be placed under arrest before the time of the Passover supper on Friday night, and was therefore calling them together for a special supper on this Thursday evening. Others thought that this was merely a special occasion which was to precede the regular Passover celebration.
So the rest of the apostles thought that they'd have a regular celebration of the Passover. They didn't realize the impending disaster that was coming, right? All right. I guess I'm up next. The apostles knew that Jesus had celebrated other Passovers without the lamb. They knew that he did not personally participate in any sacrificial service of the Jewish system. Any sacrificial service, right? He didn't believe in sacrifice. He had many times partaken of the Paschal lamb as a guest, but always when he was the host, no lamb was served. It would not have been a great surprise to the apostles to have seen the lamb omitted even on Passover night. And since this supper was given one day early, they thought nothing of its absence, right? So this seemed normal to them because Jesus had taught them how to do this, right?
Has Jesus ever said what we should eat and shouldn't eat?
Pardon?
Has Jesus ever said, was Jesus a vegetarian or a vegan?
No. It never said that anywhere in the book. right? It just said he did not eat sacrifice to animals. Okay. And I think that it was the quote, quote, sacrifice attached to it is the reason he did not do that. Right. Didn't believe in any sacrifice at all. And he surely did not believe that he was the sacrifice for all the sins of the world. Right. We've made that quite clear over the years. All right. Rodney, would you take the next one?
After receiving the greetings, a welcome extended by the father and mother of John Mark, the apostles went immediately to the upper chamber while Jesus lingered behind to talk with the Mark family.
You know, they talk so much about John Mark throughout the book, you don't think much about his parents, you know, because he was a young man. And it's kind of interesting here they mentioned that. All right. Letch, would you take the next?
Okay. It had been understood beforehand that the Master was to celebrate this occasion alone with his 12 apostles. Therefore, no servants were provided to wait upon them.
So I guess it was common for the more wealthy people to have servants for these things, right? Right. Okay, we're up again.
Okay. The desire for preference. When the apostles had been shown upstairs by John Mark, they beheld a large and commodious chamber which was completely furnished for the supper, and observed that the bread, wine, water, and herbs were all in readiness on one end of the table, except for the end on which rested the bread and wine. This long table was surrounded by 13 reclining couches, just such as would be provided for the celebration of the Passover in a well-to-do Jewish household.
You know, yeah, we don't think about this because we see these pictures of the Last Supper, but it really was not like that at all. They had reclining couches for each and every apostle, you know, so it was a pretty large place. Anyone look at it.
And the table was U-shaped.
It was U-shaped. That's right. That's right. They don't, and then none of the pictures are like that, are they?
You know, I don't understand that. Why would it be U-shaped? Because the people on the inside of the U would have their backs turned to half the people.
Nobody
There's no
sat on
people.
the inside.
No, yeah. Then you
Everybody
just sat
sat on
around the
the
table.
outside.
Yeah. You didn't sit in the center of it. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
See, that was U-shaped. So if you had servants, the service could come right in the middle and,
Yep.
you know, serve people
Aha.
around the table. Okay. All right. Gary, would you take the next one?
As the 12 entered the upper chamber, they noticed just inside the door the pitchers of water, the basins, and towels for laving their dusty feet. And since no servant had been provided to render this service, the apostles began to look at one another as soon as John Mark had left them, and each began to think within himself, "Who shall wash our feet?" And each likewise thought that it would not be he, who would thus seem to act as the servant of the others.
All right, Rodney, I got a question for you. Do
What's
you
that?
remember when we went to your house and we started the ministry then back in, I think
I
it was
do.
2011. Remember when we washed each other's feet and things,
I do.
you know?
How could I
So,
forget that?
yeah, you know, it was a long time ago, but I remember it like it was just yesterday,
Yeah.
right? Um, okay, as they stood there debating in their hearts, they surveyed the seating arrangement on the table, taking note of the higher divan of the host, with one couch on the right and 11 arranged around the table as to opposite the second seat of the honor on the host's right. All right, so the first seat to the right was considered the seat of honor. Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Yes. Except they expected the master to arrive at any moment. But they were in a quandary as to whether they should seat themselves or await his coming and depend on him to assign them their places. While they hesitated, Judas stepped over to the seat of honor at the left of the host and signified that he intended there to recline as the preferred guest. This act of Judas immediately stirred up a heated dispute among the other apostles. Judas had no sooner seized the seat of honor than John Zebedee laid claim to the next preferred seat, the one on the right of the host. Simon Peter was so enraged at this assumption of choice positions by Judas and John that as the other angry apostles looked on, he marched clear around the table and took his place on the lowest couch. The end of the seating order, and just opposite to that chosen by John Zebedee. Since others had seized the high seats, Peter thought to choose the lowest, and he did this, not merely in protest against the unseemly pride of his brethren, but with a hope that Jesus, when he should come in and see him in the place of the least honor, would call him up to a higher one, thus displacing one who had presumed to honor himself.
You know, I always thought it was odd that they had a seat of honor at all. You know, you'd think people would just sit around the U-shaped table and it wouldn't matter what we said, right? You know,
Right.
unless they just wanted to be next to Jesus. Okay. Letch, would you take the next?
Yes. With the highest and the lowest positions thus occupied, the rest of the apostles chose places, some near Judas and some near Peter. Until all were located, they were seated about the U-shaped table on these reclining divans in the following order. On the right of the Master, John; on the left, Judas, Simon Zelotes, Matthew, James, Zebedee, Andrew, the Alphaeus twins, Philip, Nathanael, Thomas, and Simon Peter.
Right.
Hmm.
There. Pam, would you take the next?
Mhm. They are gathered together to celebrate, at least in spirit, an institution which antedated even Moses and referred to the times when their fathers were slaves in Egypt. This supper is their last rendezvous with Jesus. And even in such a solemn setting, under the leadership of Judas, the apostle, are led once more to give way to their old predilection for honor, preference, and personal exaltation.
All right. Now, so remember, this is the Passover was about the being Passovered by the angel of death during Moses' Exodus. Remember that?
Yeah.
So I won't even comment on how much of that is myth.
There is no angel of death.
There is no angel of death, and there was no Passover, right, of this thing. But it made a good fairy story, right? It really did. So, you know, that's why as Christians, we do not celebrate Passover. We call it Easter now, right? Because of Jesus. So, all right. Gary, would you take the next?
They were still engaged in voicing angry recrimination
Yes.
when the master appeared in the doorway, where he hesitated a moment as to look with where he hesitated a moment as a look of disappointment slowly crept over his face. Without comment, he went to his place, and he did not disturb their sitting arrangement.
See, he already, he wanted to make this time special, and they already start arguing. Right?
Mhm.
All right. They were now ready to begin the supper, except that their feet were still unwashed, and they were in anything but a pleasant frame of mind. When the master arrived, they were still engaged in making uncomplimentary remarks about one another, to say nothing of the thoughts of some who had sufficient emotional control to refrain from publicly expressing their feelings. So they were not a happy group together, were they? All right, Rodney, would you take the next?
Yes, 2. Beginning the supper. For a few moments after the master had gone to his place, not a word was spoken. Jesus looked them all over, and relieving the tension with a smile, said, I have greatly desired to eat this Passover with you. I wanted to eat with you once more before I suffered. And realizing that my hour has come, I arranged to have this supper with you tonight. For, as concerns the morrow, we are all in the hands of the Father, whose will I have come to execute. I shall not again eat with you until you sit down with me in the kingdom which my Father will give me when I have finished that for which he sent me into this world.
In other words, he's saying he won't eat again, period, after his death.
Mhm.
Notice here there's no you in the table.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I can't see me either.
Mhm.
Letch, would you take the next one?
Yeah. After the wine and the water had been mixed, they brought the cup to Jesus, who, when he had received it from the hand of Thaddeus, held it while he offered thanks. And when he had finished offering thanks, he said, Take this cup and divide it among yourselves, and when you partake of it, realize that I shall not again drink with you the fruit of the vine, since this is our last supper. When we sit down again in this manner, it will be in the kingdom to come.
He's plainly telling them this is the end, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, number 1, Thaddeus is one of the Alphaeus twins.
Right.
And also, the Catholic Church still mixes the wine and the water
Yeah.
at
For
their
for their
service.
supper. Yeah. Right.
Well, every
Pam, would you take?
Sunday.
Yeah, every Sunday. Pam, would you take the next?
Jesus began thus to talk to his apostles because he knew that his hour had come. He understood that the time had come when he was to return to the Father and that his work on earth was almost finished. The Master knew he had revealed the Father's love on earth and had shown forth his mercy to mankind, and that he had completed that for which he came into the world, even to the receiving of all power and authority in heaven and on earth. Likewise, he knew Judas Iscariot had fully made up his mind to deliver him that night into the hands of his enemies. He fully realized that this traitorous betrayal was the work of Judas, but that it also pleased Lucifer, Satan, and Caligastia, the prince of darkness. But he featured none of those
He
who,
feared not. He
oh,
feared not.
but he feared none of those who sought his spiritual overthrow any more than he feared those who sought to accomplish his physical death. The master had but one anxiety, and that was for the safety and the salvation of his chosen followers. And so, with the full knowledge that the Father had put all things under his authority, the master now prepared to enact the parable of brotherly love.
This is the parable of brotherly love, right? The washing of the feet. All right, Gary.
Okay. 3, the washing the apostles' feet. After drinking the first cup of the Passover, it was the Jewish custom for the host to arise from the table and wash his feet. Later on,
His hands. No, his hands.
hands, excuse me.
Yeah. You remember that they had multiple hand washing all the way through the meals back
Yeah, they
then.
did.
So,
Okay.
okay.
All right. Later on in the meal and after the second cup, all of the guests likewise rose and washed their hands. I got that one. Since the apostles knew that their master never observed these rites of ceremonial hand washing, they were very curious to know what he intended to do when, after they had partaken of this first cup, he rose from the table and silently made his way over to the near door where the water pitchers, basins, and towels had been placed. And their curiosity grew into astonishment as they saw the master remove his own garment, girth
Outer
himself
garment.
with
His outer garment.
his own, yeah, I do say own, never mind, his outer
Yeah.
garment, girth himself with a towel, and began to pour water into one of the foot basins. Imagine the amazement of these 12 men who had so recently refused to wash one another's feet and who had engaged in such unseemly disputes about positions of honor at the table. When they saw him make his way around the unoccupied end of the table to the lowest seat of the feast, where Simon Peter reclined and kneeling down in the attitude of a servant made ready to wash Simon's feet. As the master knelt, all 12 rose as one man to their feet. Even the treacherous Judas so far forgot his infamy for a moment as to rise with his fellow apostles in this expression of surprise, respect, and utter amazement.
All right, so none of them was expecting this. Just like when we did it at Rodney, nobody expected to do what we did over there that night. You know, I know everybody was curious when I brought in some basins and a bunch of pictures, but I don't think anybody surmised that's what we were going to do that night. It's quite a surprise. All right. There stood Simon Peter, looking down into the upturned face of his master. Jesus said nothing. It was not necessary that he should speak. His attitude plainly revealed that he was minded to wash Simon Peter's feet. Notwithstanding his frailties of the flesh, Peter loved the master. This Galilean fisherman was the first human being wholeheartedly to believe in the divinity of Jesus and to make full and public confession of that belief. And Peter had never since really doubted the divine nature of the master. Since Peter so revered the honored Jesus in his heart, it was not strange that his soul resented the thought of Jesus kneeling there before him in the attitude of a menial servant and proposed to wash his feet as would a slave. When Peter presently collected his wits sufficiently to address the master, he spoke the heart feeling of all his fellow apostles. Guess what that was? We're going to find out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rodney.
After a few moments of this great embarrassment, Peter said, Master, do you really mean to wash my feet? And then, looking up into Peter's face, Jesus said, You may not fully understand what I'm about to do, but hereafter you will know the meaning of all these things. Then said Simon Peter, drawing a long breath, said, Master, you shall never wash my feet. And each of the apostles nodded their approval of Peter's firm declaration of refusal to allow Jesus thus to humble himself before them.
So they couldn't stand it, could they? They didn't like the idea of him humbling himself before them. All right, Letch, would you take the next?
The dramatic appeal of this unusual scene at first touched the heart of even Judas Iscariot, but when his vainglorious intellect passed judgment upon the spectacle, he concluded that this gesture of humility was just one more episode which conclusively proved that Jesus would never qualify as Israel's deliverer, and that he had made no mistake in the decision to desert the Master's cause.
Yeah. In other words, he's not a king. He
Yeah.
won't sit on the throne.
No, doesn't plan to. Pam, would you take the next?
As they all stood there in breathless amazement, Jesus said, Peter, I declare that if I do not wash your feet, you will have no part with me in that which I am about to perform. When Peter heard this declaration, coupled with the fact that Jesus continued kneeling there at his feet, he made one of those decisions of blind acquiescence in compliance with the wish of one whom he respected and loved. As it began to dawn on Simon Peter that there was attached to this proposed enactment of service some signification that determined one's future connection with the Master's work, he not only became reconciled in the thought of allowing Jesus to wash his feet, but in his characteristic and impetuous manner said, Then, Master, wash not my feet only, but also my hands and my head.
He must
Do it
have,
all.
huh?
Yeah. All right. Gary, would you take the next?
As the master made ready to begin washing Peter's feet, he said, He who is already clean needs only to have his feet washed. He who sit with me tonight are clean, but not all. Ha ha. But the dust of your feet should have been washed away before you sat down at meal with me. And besides, I would perform this service for you as a parable to illustrate the meaning of a new commandment which I presently give you.
Right, so there's a reason for all this, right? In like manner, the master went around the table in silence, washing the feet of the 12 apostles, not even passing by Judas. When Jesus had finished washing the feet of the 12, he donned his cloak, returned to the place of his host, and after looking over his bewildered apostles, said, let me read this one, Rodney. All right. Do you really understand what I have done to you? You call me master, and you say, well, for so I am. And then the master has washed your feet. Why was it that you were unwilling to wash one another's feet? Good question, right? What lesson should you learn from this parable in which the master so willingly does that service which his brethren were unwilling to do for one another? Verily, verily, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master. Neither is one who is sent greater than he who sends him. You have seen the way of service in my life among you, and blessed are you who will have the gracious courage so to serve. But why are you so slow to learn the secret of greatness in the spiritual kingdom? Is not like the methods of power in the material world. So what's he trying to say here?
Service. That's what it's all about.
Service.
Serving
Service. We always come back to that, don't we? Rodney, will you take the next?
When I came into this chamber tonight, you were not content proudly to refuse to wash one another's feet. But you must also fall to disputing among yourselves as to who should have the places of honor at my table. Such honors the Pharisees and the children of this world seek, but it should not be so among the ambassadors of the heavenly kingdom. Do you not know that there can be no place of preferment at my table? Do you not understand that I love each of you as I do the others? Do you not know that the place nearest me, as men regard such honors, can mean nothing concerning your standing in the kingdom of heaven? You know that the kings of the Gentiles have lordship over their subjects, while those who exercise this authority are sometimes called benefactors. But it shall not be so in the kingdom of heaven. He who would be great among you, let him become as the younger, while he who would be chief, let him become as one who serves. Who is the greater, he who sits at meat, or he who serves? Is it not commonly regarded that he who sits at meat is the greater? But you will observe that I am among you as one who serves. If you are willing to become fellow servants with me in doing the Father's will, in the kingdom to come, you shall sit with me in power, still doing the Father's will in future glory.
So what does this mean? That means that when we get to the mansion world, this will be the case. Those who serve will be the greatest, right?
Well, I think will be serving all the way to paradise.
I believe that too.
And that's what
All the
it's
way
all
through.
about. Teamwork.
That's what it's all about. All the way through, right? You become the server and you get served by becoming the server, right?
Well, our Creator humbled himself.
Yes,
That's a
constantly.
big statement.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting parable, right? Lech, would you take this one and the next one, please?
Okay. When Jesus had finished speaking, the Alphaeus twins brought on the bread and wine with the bitter herbs and the paste of dried fruits for the next course of the Last Supper. Okay.
Go ahead and take this one too, Lech.
Last words to the betrayer. For some minutes, the apostles ate in silence, but under the influence of the Master's cheerful demeanor, they were soon drawn into conversation, and ere long the meal was proceeding as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred to interfere with the good cheer and social accord of this extraordinary occasion. After some time had elapsed, and about the middle of this second course of the meal, Jesus, looking them over, said, I have told you how much I desire to have this supper with you, and knowing how the evil forces of darkness have conspired to bring about the death of the Son of Man, I determined to eat this supper with you in this secret chamber and a day in advance of the Passover, since I will not be with you by this time tomorrow night. I have repeatedly told you that I must return to the Father. Now has my hour come, but it was not required that one of you should betray me into the hands of my enemies.
So what's he telling them? That Judas did not have to betray him. They were going to kill him anyway, right?
Anyway, yep.
Anyway,
So it was a mistake on Judas' part all the way through. Ham, would you take the next one?
Uh-huh. When the 12 heard this, having already been robbed of much of their self-assertiveness and self-confidence by the parable of the feet washing and the master's subsequent discourse, they began to look at one another while in disconcerted tones they hesitatingly inquired, "Is it I?" And when they had all so inquired, Jesus said, "While it is necessary that I go to the Father, it was not required that one of you should become a traitor to fulfill the Father's will. This is the coming to fruit of the concealed evil in the heart of one who failed to love the truth with his whole soul. How deceitful is the intellectual pride that precedes the spiritual downfall. My friend of many years, who even now eats my bread, will be willing to betray me, even as he now dips his hands with me in the dish."
All right, I want to bring something up here. Notice he says here, how deceitful is the intellectual pride that proceeds the spiritual downfall. Did y'all see that?
Mm-hmm.
So that applies to us in this world especially. Our prideful selves want to say, we want to do something this way. This is the way we want to do it. It's not the will of God that we do it that way, but it's our own intellectual pride. And that pride is the start of our own spiritual downfall.
I mean, it was the same with Lucifer.
Same with Lucifer, same with Caligasta, Satan, all of them. And now it's the same with whom? Judas, right? So Judas knows he's being called out this very moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a little paranoid.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's go on. Gary.
And when Jesus had thus spoken, they all began again to ask, "Is it I?" And as Jesus, sitting on the left of his master, again asked, "Is it I?" Jesus, dripping the bread in the dish of herbs, handed it to Judas, saying, "You have said." But the others did not hear Jesus speak to Judas. John, who reclined on Jesus's right hand, bent over and asked the master, "Who is it?" We should know who it is that has proved untrue to his trust. Jesus answered, "Already have I told you, even he to whom I gave the sop." But it was so natural for the host to give a sop to one who sat next to him on the left that none of them took notice of this, even though the master had so plainly spoken. But Jesus was painfully
Judas.
conscious. Judas,
Judas.
yeah. But Judas was painfully conscious of the meaning of the master's words associated with his act, and he became fearful lest his brethren were likewise now aware that he was the betrayer.
So he's been called out. And like all cowards, when they're called out, he thought of nothing but fleeing, right?
Yeah.
Peter was highly excited by what had been said, and leaning forward over the table, he asked John, "Ask him who it is, or if he has told you, tell me who is the betrayer." So he wanted to know who betrayed Jesus. All right, Rodney, would you take the next?
Jesus brought their whisperings to an end by saying, "I sorrow that this evil should have come to pass, and hoped even up to this hour that the power of truth might triumph over the deceptions of evil. But such victories are not won without the faith of the sincere love of truth. I would not have told you these things at this, our last supper, but I desire to warn you of these sorrows and so prepare you for what is now upon us. I have told you of this because I desire that you should recall after I have gone that I knew about all these evil plottings, and that I forewarned you of my betrayal. And I do all this only that you may be strengthened for the temptations and trials which are just ahead.
So he wanted to strengthen everyone else at the table there, right? Because they see their own brethren betraying Jesus, right? All right. Letch, would you take the next?
Okay. When Jesus had thus spoken, leaning over towards Judas, he said, "What you have decided to do, do quickly." And when Judas heard these words, he arose from the table and hastily left the room, going out into the night to do what he had set his mind to accomplish. When the other apostles saw Judas hasten off after Jesus had spoken to him, they thought he had gone to procure something additional for the supper, or to do some other errand for the master, since they supposed he still carried the bag.
And we all know that he had already turned the bag over, didn't
Yeah, Jesus knew that if Judas lingered, there it would be uproarious, that
he? Yeah,
it would be a lot of confusion. They would grab Judas, it would turn out ugly.
yeah,
So he
really
just
would
wanted
have.
him to take off because he's
Do
got
what he
more
had to do.
to
Yeah, that's right.
keep the
Pam, would
peace.
you take?
Mhm.
Yeah. Keep.
Jesus now knew that
Right.
nothing could be done to keep Judas from turning traitor. He started with 12, now he had 11. He chose 6 of these apostles, and though Judas was among those nominated by his first chosen apostles, still the Master accepted him and had, up to this very hour, done everything possible to sanctify and save him, even as he had wrought for the peace and salvation of the others.
So he tried to reform him all the way up to the last minute, didn't
Yeah.
he? Gary, would you take the next?
Yeah. The supper, with its tender episodes and softening touches, was Jesus's last appeal to the desiring Judas, but it was of no avail. Warning, even when administered in the most tactful manner and conveyed in the most kindly spirit, as a rule, only intensifies hatred and fires the evil determination to carry out to the full one's own selfish projects when love is once really dead.
And we see this in divorces. Once the love has died, there's nothing else to salvage, right? There's to it. Establishing and remembrance supper. They brought Jesus the third cup of wine of blessing. He arose from the couch and taking the cup in his hands, blessed it, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink it. It shall be the cup of my remembrance, not the cup." It didn't say his blood, did it?
No.
Okay. I want to point that out. This shall be the cup of my remembrance. This is the cup of the blessing of the new dispensation of grace and truth. Shall be to you the emblem of the bestowal and ministry of the divine spirit of truth. And I will not drink cup with you until I drink in new form with the Father's eternal kingdom. Did you know what he's saying here? This is the cup of blessing, and this is the cup to remind you of his seventh bestowal and of the of the spirit of truth. That's what this remembrance cup is about, not the blood of Christ.
Yeah, the
Okay?
pouring out of the Spirit of truth.
The pouring out of the spirit of truth. Rodney hit it on the head. All right. Rodney, would you take the next one?
The apostles all sensed that something out of the ordinary was transpiring as they drank of this cup of blessing in profound reverence and perfect silence. The old Passover commemorated the emergence of their fathers from a state of racial slavery into individual freedom. Now the Master was instituting a new remembrance supper as a symbol of the new dispensation, wherein the enslaved individual emerges from the bondage of ceremonialism and selfishness into the spiritual joy of the brotherhood and fellowship of the liberated faith sons of the living God.
Do y'all realize what Jesus was trying to do? They did, and the church ended up doing exactly opposite of what he planned,
Yeah,
didn't they? Because they covered it up with ceremonialism and selfishness all the way through the church, right? So they missed the whole point of what he was doing. Lech, would you take the next one?
When they had finished drinking this new cup of remembrance, the Master took up the bread and, after giving thanks, broke it in pieces, and directing them to pass it around, said, "Take this bread of remembrance and eat it. I have told you that I am the bread of life, and this bread of life is the united life of the Father and the Son in one gift. The word of the Father, as revealed in the Son, is indeed the bread of life." When they had partaken of the bread of remembrance, the symbol of the living word of truth incarnated in the likeness of mortal flesh, they all sat down.
So he's telling them his bestowal, his revealing the Father in the flesh in himself is what this bread is, right?
Roger,
Yeah,
isn't that the Creator sons come from the Father and the Son?
that's
Correct?
correct. That's correct. And they're the incarnation of the concept of the Father and the Son, too, right?
Correct.
And that incarnation is the bread or the sustenance in which allows us to continue on past this life. So that's
right.
why it's called the bread of life, right?
Yeah.
By believing in God and the Son and the Creator Son, you nourish yourself with the bread of truth or the bread of life, and that's what allows you to continue on past this existence. Does that make sense?
That's right.
Now, when
How
did
many
this,
times how many times did Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the bread, right? All right. Go
Way, the
ahead,
truth, and
Letch.
life.
when
Yeah.
did this become corrupted by the Catholic Church? You know,
Right
It was
away,
Paul.
Letch. Yeah. It
Well, it
was
was Paul
corrupted
that
by
corrupted.
Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Paul.
corrupted by Paul. Yeah. More than anybody else. And after Paul came the organization of the Catholic Church shortly after that, within 400 years.
I'm
So
surprised Peter agreed with Paul about this.
I know they were fighting constantly, but apparently Paul won out, right? Because that's what turned into the Catholic Church.
Wasn't the
All
Catholic
right.
Church wasn't the Catholic Church given the blessing of the Emperor Constantine at the Council of Nicaea?
Nicaea, yes, they did.
So basically, the Catholic Church, and I'm not cutting them down, this is just fact, I believe, that the Catholic Church was brought out of by a politician, the emperor,
Yeah.
and it was used as a social control because Rome had become so corrupt, it was self-destructing because of its lack of morals. And he
Mm-hmm.
saw that the Christians, the way they was practicing their worship at that time, didn't have the problems that the normal Roman had. So
Right.
he desired to bring that attitude into the Roman Empire to save the empire from their own demise.
Destruction. Yeah, exactly.
So basically the Catholic Church was brought into being as a political tool to control and save.
And why does that happen? Because you're mixing religion and politics there, right? That's never
Mhm.
good. All right, let's go on. Who's next? Pam, I think you're next.
Okay.
Did I skip over Letch? Did Letch just read?
No, you got it. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Pam.
In instituting this remembrance supper, the master, as was always his habit, resorted to parables and symbols. He employed symbols because he wanted to teach certain great spiritual truths in such a manner as to make it difficult for his successors to attach precise interpretations and definite meanings to his words. In this way, he sought to prevent successive generations from crystallizing his teachings and binding down his spiritual meanings by the dead chains of tradition and dogma. In the establishment of the only ceremony or sacrament associated with his whole life mission, Jesus took great pains to suggest his meanings rather than to commit himself to
Precise.
definitions. He did not wish to destroy the individual's concept of divine communion by establishing a precise form. Neither did he desire to limit the believer's spiritual imagination by formally cramping it. He rather sought to set man's reborn soul free upon the joyous wings of a new and living spiritual liberty.
And
Yeah.
what did the church do? It did just the opposite.
It
Mhm.
cramped it.
It cramped it. It created ceremonies and said this is the only way it can be, and that was totally wrong.
It
Right.
goes back to that, what you were saying, what we were saying a little while back, the material side of us seems to screw up everything.
Yeah,
And
it does.
the service side of us is the side that should be
Mhm.
prominent.
We'll take the next one. Next one, Gary.
Okay. Notwithstanding the master's effort thus to establish this new sacrament of remembrance, those who followed after him in the intervening centuries saw to it that his expressed desire was effectively thwarted, and that this simple spiritual symbolism of that last night in the flesh has been reduced to, excuse me, precise interpretations and subjected to the almost mathematical precision of a set formula. Of all Jesus' teachings, none has become more traditionally standardized. You know,
Yep.
something, I grew up with a kid who became a Lutheran minister, and my parents went to a church at one time with his parents. And when he was doing his coming up, graduating from the minister school, they were saying that, he had to conduct a service, and they said, he did everything perfect. And they said, I think it was my mother said something, well, he knew, something about how smart he was. And you know what the real test was? How he followed each established pattern. He
Yeah.
passed on the fact that he would, clean the vessels in a certain circular motion with a certain rag, and he placed it here,
Yeah.
etc.
Ceremony.
And it
Way
had,
past ridiculous. Yeah, it's way
yeah,
past ridiculous. Yeah, it is. Let's move on. The Supper of Remembrance, when it is partaken by those who are sun-believing, God-knowing, does not need to have associated with its symbolism any of man's puerile, get this, puerile misrepresentations regarding the meaning of the divine presence. In other words, we messed it up, didn't we? For upon all such occasions, the Master is really present. How's he present, y'all? Through the Spirit of
Spirit of
truth,
truth.
right? That's right. The Master is really present. The Remembrance Supper is the believer's symbolic rendezvous with Michael. When you become thus spirit conscious, the Son is actually present, and his spirit fraternizes with the indwelling fragment of his Father. That's pretty specific, isn't it?
Mhm.
So
Oh,
when you do this, the fragment of God communicates with the Spirit of truth, right?
I thought it
All
just.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thought adjuster. Rodney, would you take the next one? We're going to finish this paper, y'all. We might get a little over,
Okay.
but only a little bit. So let's go ahead and
That's
try.
okay.
After they had engaged in meditation for a few moments, Jesus continued speaking. When you do these things, recall the life I have lived on earth among you, and rejoice that I am to continue to live on earth with you and to serve through you. As individuals, contend not among yourselves as to who shall be greatest. Be you as brethren, and when the kingdom grows, to embrace large groups of believers. Likewise, should you refrain from contending for greatness or seeking preferment between such groups.
So don't push yourself, you push the group, right? It's not about me, it's about everybody. All right, Letch, would you take the next one?
And this mighty occasion took place in the upper chamber of a friend. There was nothing of sacred form or ceremonial consecration about either the supper or the building. The Remembrance Supper was established without ecclesiastical sanction.
And we can't say that that's the case after from what comes next. Can we?
Yeah.
Pam, would you take the next
Uh-huh.
one?
When Jesus had thus established the supper of the remembrance, he said to the 12, "And as often as you do this, do it in remembrance of me. And when you do remember me, first look back upon my life in the flesh. Recall that I was once with you, and then by faith discern that you shall all sometime sup with me in the Father's eternal kingdom. This is the new Passover which I leave with you, even the memory of my bestowal life, the word of eternal truth, and of my love for you, the outpouring of my spirit of truth upon all flesh."
Notice it says nothing about Jesus's blood, does it?
Right.
Nothing about sacrifice. Never mentioned during this whole supper, right? It's got nothing to do with that. All right. Gary, would you take this last? I think it's the last here.
And they entered this celebration of the old but bloodless Passover in connection with the inauguration of the new supper of remembrance by singing all together the 118th Psalm.
And I think when we were at Rodney's, we did that, didn't we? Read
Yeah,
the
we did.
118th Psalm that
Well,
day, right?
they sang it.
Yeah, they sang it together.
Yeah, I
All
don't know
right, let
how.
me. I don't either. That would have been a tricky thing, wouldn't it? Uh, share the prayer of acceptance here. Okay. Pam, who's up?
Lech.
Okay.
Letch, would you read our prayer?
Yes. Prayer of acceptance. I believe that God is my paradise Father, and that only by faith am I saved. No sacrifice is necessary. By this same faith, I became a child of God and know that all men and women are my brothers and sisters. We know the Son of God, the sovereign of our universe of Nebadon, as Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. By allowing the will of God to become my will, I will someday stand in the presence of the Paradise Father. In the name of Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen.
Amen. And I want to express my gratitude for everyone coming tonight and sharing this with us. That means a lot. for sure.
That was a good paper.
And thank you all. Yeah, it's a very good paper. Thank you all out there who's listened to us tonight. Please share it with someone else. And hopefully they'll get blessed like we did tonight. From just reading this is just amazing. It really is.
It was a powerful session. Thank you all.
Yes, it was.
It was.
Well,
Mhm.
okay, we'll see everybody. This is Tuesday, right? I
Thursday.
lose
Thursday.
Let's see, Thursday.
See you Tuesday.
Yeah, this is Tuesday. We'll see everybody Thursday. Okay.
Oh, it's
Okay.
Thursday
All right.
today. See you
Huh?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Today, Thursday.
Yes.
Yes.
Today is Thursday. I'm losing. I've lost all count of time taking care of so many people.
I understand.
Yeah.
Really is.
Mhm.
All right, y'all. I love you guys, and we will see you Tuesday. All right.
Love you guys.
I say,
Bye-bye.
All right,
take
yeah.
care.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend. All right. Bye-bye.